go ahead and get started. So obviously we are in the hopefully the waning days of this pandemic that just affected our world, our country, and our state really over the past year. And I know that it affected y'all in different ways. But just to get a perspective, if we could talk a little bit about how you, from your unique perspective, how'd you get through it? What were some challenges? What were some things you learned from the past year living through COVID? And Deborah, we'll start with you. We'll kind of go around the circle again.
Well, I said before, it was a very tough year, but it's also an amazingly good year, which is really hard to reconcile. Caldwell had one of its best years in terms of new private investment and project completions. Our pipeline is still very good and fat and busier than ever. Very difficult to reconcile with the COVID year. When it hit, furniture was hit, seemed like fastest and hardest, and our unemployment jumped back up to 16%. Hadn't been there since the Great Recession. We've recovered from that for the most part, but just like everyone else, the labor shortage and the supply chain issues right now are giving us fits. We're still growing and posting a lot of good news, but it's posing a real challenge for our businesses and industries. I think that the thing that was one of the best things to come out of it for us in terms of partnerships, collaboration in our community at the absolute highest levels was at an all-time high. And we fared very well as a community, from the shutdown to PPP, PPE, COVID testing and vaccinations, the very highest levels of leadership in healthcare, education, government, business and industry. Everybody had a seat at the table and still meet regularly, which has just been phenomenal. I think those gains we'll take with us as we go forward. All in all, a big learning year and a strong year.
Thank you. Greg, from your perspective, talking to a lot of different clients, I would imagine you got a variety of responses in terms of that question. From your viewpoint, how did y'all fare last year?
I think our region fared very, very well. Ben, obviously we had many of our businesses that suffered, especially hospitality. Such an impact to many of our hospitality businesses here in Western North Carolina. But one of the things that I saw out of this was just how resilient and how adaptable so many of our businesses were through this entire process. Whether it's a restaurant figuring out on the fly, how do I move to a carry out only model, or it's a manufacturer shifting their focus to PPE production as opposed to their historical product lines. There was a lot of adaptability and flexibility that went into 2020. I think while we're still seeing some lingering effects in the hospitality space, I think that's really coming back well. I think from a manufacturing perspective, things are going very well with many of our manufacturers here in the region. And then thinking of it from a banker perspective, and we want to talk about the mortgage impact of what we've seen with real estate in Western North Carolina, and how attractive that has become. I do believe that we have seen that shift of individuals moving away from more highly populated areas into more rural markets or that next level metropolitan area. We have certainly seen the benefit of that in Western North Carolina. And I look at that as such an opportunity because of the talent that is coming into Western North Carolina. I think folks have figured out, while there's been a shift I call it a shift to digital. There is we were on that track for a number of years. I think the pandemic only allowed us to pick up the speed of that shift to digital. And now with individuals recognizing that they can work from anywhere, the quality of life that we have to offer here in Western North Carolina has certainly been a benefit for us.
That's a great point. And that's even before the pandemic. I mean, we were talking about that as well, because Western North Carolina, in terms of roads and infrastructure and things like that, was made it a little bit more challenging than certain other places in the state. But that's been an ongoing, issue. But this, I think it got ramped up through the pandemic. I mean, big time. Kit, tell us a little bit about Buncombe County, Asheville, and how the area made it through last year.
Well, we went from being number one in the state in low unemployment to being at the top of that list after the pandemic immediately occurred. A lot of people, we owe a debt of gratitude to our tourism industry for establishing Asheville's name recognition and brand and things of that nature. But when this shutdown occurred, it immediately impacted all of our great restaurants, so many small, unique businesses, all of our hotels, very quickly and very severely. So as a result, we've bounced back a lot. We've bounced back by about 24,000 jobs, but we're still lower than we were pre-pandemic in terms of our overall working population. All that being said, there's a tendency for people across the state to think that we only do tourism. At the same time that we were witnessing this devastating blow to that industry, we also landed the largest manufacturing project in North Carolina history right here with Pratt & Whitney. And Ben was intimately involved. Ben Teague was intimately involved with that particular project. So it's been the best of times and the worst of times in many ways. But things are snapping back. As Greg said, we're seeing lots of people coming to town. We've got workforce issues like the rest of the country does that we're still trying to puzzle through. But I'm very bullish. The basics of our economy are strong, and I'm bullish about where we're going to go in the near future.
It makes such a big difference to be able to diversify different industries and such. It's so important. And this past year was just a great example of being able to do that. Brittany, tell us a little bit about what's going on in Hendersonville and your area. You have a good mix of it's travel tour, it's tourism, but it's also manufacturing and those type of things. Tell us a little bit about how your area fared.
Yeah, so when the world shut down mid-March, I was talking to some of my counterparts, and we thought we would have 2 weeks to work on pet projects. And we thought we could, kick our feet up a little bit more and exhale, and boy, were we wrong. Those first 2 weeks into the month was trying to figure out what in the world was going on and what that meant specifically to our manufacturing community. Manufacturers were all essential, and they needed to figure out how to get back to work and get back to work safely. And they all did. They all fared well. They had some hard moments, but they did great. And we saw really the results of the pandemic in growth opportunities as well. We had a company who was going to expand internationally decide to come here domestically. So we saw that supply chain through low impact technologies and their announcement in Henderson County. And then we saw healthcare continue to thrive with Jabil's expansion into Henderson County. I'm going to echo the workforce challenges. We saw our unemployment go up to 14% and back down to 4%. But when we look at that unemployment right now in advanced manufacturing, it's still at 10%. And when we start diving into, the specific jobs that our organization caters to, and we believe that we're about 15,000 people short in the region right now when it comes to workforce. So really trying to be resilient, but get creative on keeping up with the momentum, keeping up with the supply and demand, and keeping a successful manufacturing community.
Hey, Ben, so maybe you can piggyback on what Kit said a little bit. And in terms of, from development standpoint, working at Biltmore Farms, of course, I would imagine that still was kind of chugging along pretty good. But also from your unique perspective, just in terms of the, obviously this huge announcement, in terms of what came to Buncombe, but you got to have the biggest poker face, man, because people like me were trying to figure out what it was and get all that kind of stuff. You had to have those code names, all that kind of crazy stuff. So tell us a little bit about that and how y'all got through last year.
Sure. Project Ranger was the code name, and we had lots of people speculating as to what that could be. But, you know, it was an interesting time for Biltmore Farms. We have hotels, we have office space, we have retail, and, you know, and then we also have these land holdings where Pratt and Whitney went. And so it was definitely interesting times. And I would say this, kind of zooming out a little bit, when the tide of good fortune ebbs back out, you find out who you are and what you're made of. And structurally for the region, I would say we have some really strong areas. Our brand is still strong. People still come here and live healthy lives. They, you know, still view it as a respite. They still come here for the outdoor environmental mecca kind of pieces. But we also find out there's some soft points to who we are. We find out that hospitality can't support everybody, and that can't be the mainstay of how we thrive. So we have to continue to focus on manufacturing and making things, and turning our sights toward corporate roles and creating career ladders and opportunities for folks, not just jobs, but career ladders for people. And so overall, I think we have an incredibly bright future. We just have to continue to focus on being resilient and keeping our eyes on not just visitation, but innovation. And that's kind of what this Pratt and Whitney project has brought. When you bring hundreds of people, 800 people making 70 grand a year, or nearly 70 grand a year, that's a huge chunk of capital in the market, but also intellectual capital for our community. And that's what we're excited about. So while there were times when I was sitting in my chair and we had hundreds of hotel rooms and maybe 5 booked out in the toughest times, but we are never busier helping create jobs for the long term here.
Thanks. Tom, I'm interested to hear from you from the standpoint of SylvanSport and how the year was specifically for the company, but also from an industry standpoint. One would think that because a lot of people spend a lot of time outside because it was one of the only things you could do, that the industry fared fairly well. But is that necessarily the case?
Well, it is. There's so many layers to 2020 and even 2021 that we're all touching on. And like most of us, 14 months ago, we were full stop. You know, late March, we had a full truckload of exhibit materials leaving the dock, and literally caught the truck driver as he was pulling away and said, "Don't go, we're canceling." Within a week, we shifted to making PPE, and that kept all our team fully employed, you know, no loss of payroll, which was great. I think it was fortuitous that we were able to do that quickly, because I think if we waited another week, we probably would have been too late to be effective there. But one of the things I think that's exciting for us, being in the outdoor space, a lot of the aspects of our local economy that others here have touched on all roll up at SylvanSport. So we actually are a manufacturer, but we're a tourist destination as well. We bring nearly 1,000 families a year come to Brevard to pick up their SylvanSport various campers, and they begin their outdoor vacation right here at our door. So we consider ourselves a retail factory, so it's a fun way to blend all the aspects of our the advantages of Western North Carolina into one business. So I'm grateful for that. Fortuitously as well, at the end of 2019, we made the shift to direct to consumer fully. And our timing on that couldn't have been better, because as we went into 2020 and we got kind of midway through last year, the outdoor industry just exploded. As you said, it was one of the only things that people could pursue. And so being already set up to be direct to consumer was just a tremendous year for us. I think every month since last July, we've set a new record in terms of business. And so, it's a little awkward feeling that way, but, we look at the silver linings and count our blessings.
John, so at AV Tech, in terms of, we're talking training workers, trained qualified workers is a big deal and stuff like that. It's on everybody's mind and such. We're going to get into that in terms of, what's new and as well. But how did the college deal with, students and coming in, not coming in, and virtual learning and all that kind of stuff? How'd y'all make it through last year?
Right. Great. That's a great question. We never closed. The students may not have been on campus, but we were still teaching. Most of our students in the lecture environment stayed home, tried to do it online. If it was a lab, a shop, a clinical, well, they came in and we did that, obviously, with all the precautions. Very, very proud of my team, kept the pandemic at bay on campus because of the precautions that we took here, in all of our classrooms. But people were still fearful, and we saw, like all but about 2 or 3 community colleges in North Carolina, most of them across the country, we saw a decline. Broadband is the issue, I think. Devices is the second issue. And then when schools closed, moms and dads had to stay home. So, we learned through our research that if a parent had a school-age child, they probably only had one device. The student got first dibs, if you will, on when they were going to use that. Mom and dad then had late nights, early mornings, and the pressure was just too much, and they stepped away from higher ed. And we understand it. The pressures of the pandemic happened, and people had to make choices. We expect they'll come back. We're hearing that they want to come back. They want to be face to face. They want to be with each other and with our faculty. So we're expecting big enrollments in the fall.